The story takes place in a modern world where dungeons, monsters, and special abilities exist. Our protagonist, Ju Dong-hoon, possesses the rare authority of necromancy, but there is one cruel limitation: he can only summon weak E-rank skeletons. Everything changes when he unlocks a hidden achievement that allows his skeletons to evolve. This is the story of the weakest necromancer rising toward the top. The story begins inside an E-rank dungeon, where a small group of hunters is surrounded by goblins. Despite being heavily outnumbered, their leader remains calm while giving orders. Standing quietly behind them is Ju Dong-hoon, hiding beneath his hood. When the hunters can no longer hold their ground, the leader asks the necromancer for help. Dong-han raises his skull-shaped staff, which glows with purple energy as 10 skeletons rise from the ground. The battle immediately shifts in the hunters' favor. The others are shocked to see a necromancer in such a low-ranked dungeon. Since necromancers are known to be among the strongest authority users, they assume Dong-han must be incredibly powerful. Hearing their praise only makes him smile bitterly. Out of billions of people, only around 1,000 possess the rare authority of necromancy. However, unlike every other necromancer, Dong-hoon is cursed to summon only E-rank skeletons. While other necromancers command terrifying undead armies, his summons are the weakest possible. 10 years earlier, humanity began awakening unique authorities upon turning 20. Some gained crafting abilities, while others received combat or support powers. These abilities allowed humanity to survive against monsters and dungeons. Although Dong-han awakened as the rare necromancer everyone admired, his growth stopped immediately because of his weak summons. Since then, he has been stuck clearing E-rank dungeons as a mercenary. After finishing the mission, Dong-han collects his reward and leaves. Looking at his small paycheck, he sighs. Sometimes he wishes he had awakened an ordinary production skill instead. Even part-time workers earn more than he does, yet he refuses to give up on becoming a hunter. As he walks through the city, a news report announces that the famous hunter known as the Dark Lord has reached A rank in only 3 years, setting a new record. The news frustrates Dong-han because the Dark Lord awakened his necromancer authority on the very same day. While one became a legendary hunter, Dong-han remains trapped as the weakest necromancer. Trying to clear his mind, he heads to his usual training spot and summons his skeletons. Since they always return after being summoned, he has even given them simple names based on their weapons, like Bony 1 with a greatsword, Bony 2 with a spear, and Bony 3 with a bow. Every day he makes them train, hoping they will eventually grow stronger. His efforts did produce some results at first, allowing the skeletons to defeat 3 goblins at once. However, they never improved beyond that point. No matter how hard they trained, their strength refused to increase, leaving Dong-hoon frustrated once again. While complaining about his terrible luck, he suddenly hears a growl behind him. Turning around, he freezes as a massive orc approaches. The monster's overwhelming presence weakens all of his skeletons, reducing their combat abilities. Realizing an orc should never appear here, Dong-han immediately understands that a nearby dungeon break must have occurred. The orc swings its huge weapon, and Dong-han orders his skeletons to block the attack. They are effortlessly smashed aside and disappear. The orc then charges straight toward him. Determined to survive, Dong-hoon keeps summoning skeletons while retreating. An arrow briefly distracts the monster, giving him enough time to form another line of defense. Even though he still has enough energy to summon several more skeletons, every single one is easily defeated. Soon, all of his energy is exhausted, yet the orc remains completely unharmed. With only 3 skeletons left standing, Dong-hoon believes this is the end. At that exact moment, a brilliant golden notification suddenly appears before him. Out of instinct, he checks the message and discovers he has unlocked the hidden achievement called the 10,000 use rule. As a reward, he is promoted to a dank necromancer. His exhausted energy is instantly restored, and all of his skeletons evolve into stronger versions. Without wasting another second, Dong-hoon summons his upgraded army. Alongside his sword, spear, and archer skeletons, new allies appear, including a heavily armored tank and a powerful mage. For the first time, his undead army has a balanced formation capable of fighting powerful enemies. The battle changes instantly. His evolved skeletons force the orc backward, eventually knocking its weapon from its hands. Finally, the skeleton mage gathers a massive fireball and launches it straight at the helpless monster, defeating it in a single explosive attack. As the victorious skeletons turn toward their master, Dong-hoon stands speechless. After years of disappointment and endless struggle, the hidden achievement has finally broken the curse holding him back. For the first time in his life, he feels that fate has given him a real chance, and his journey to becoming a truly powerful necromancer has finally begun. Dong-hoon sat at his small table, slurping a bowl of hot ramen. As he ate, he kept his eyes fixed on his glowing status screen. He never really expected his skills to improve this fast. For a long time, he felt stuck. Now, he finally saw proof that his hard work was paying off. He wasn't sure when he would officially reach C rank, but he was satisfied for now. He knew he needed to stay humble and stick to the basics. The power of his intermediate skeleton was already very impressive. It made him daydream about the future. He imagined Bony 5 casting massive blizzard storms. He saw Bony 1 and Bony 2 becoming legendary masters of the sword and spear. The thought made him smile. He felt truly ready for whatever came next. When Dong-hoon arrived at work, the mood felt heavy. Something was definitely wrong. He noticed a man wearing a green badge. That meant the man was a C-rank hunter, a high-level professional. Soon, his boss called him into the office to share some big news. The boss talked about a new guild called the Giparing Guild. Everyone in Korea knew that name. It was started by a famous top-tier ranker named Jae-pang, also known as the Fine Bow. The guild was planning to explore a brand new dungeon that had just appeared. They needed porters to carry their gear. The offer was incredible. The pay was 10 times higher than a normal job. They were even willing to hire E-rank hunters like Dong-hoon. Dong-hoon didn't say yes right away. He wanted to know more about the dungeon first. The leader explained that the dungeon was near a place called Padu. It was a very difficult site. 5 amateur teams had already tried to clear it and failed. Its official rank was still a mystery. However, the boss insisted it would be safe because a superstar like Jae-pang was leading the way. Dong-hoon wouldn't have to fight at all. He would just be a porter. Dong-hoon thought hard about the offer. 10 times the pay usually meant the job was very dangerous. He was still mentally tired from a scary fight with an orc the day before. But then, he remembered something. He once saw an interview with a famous hunter called the Dark Lord. The expert said that the best way to level up fast is to enter dungeons that are higher than your own rank. This convinced him. Dong-hoon accepted the job. The expedition was set for 1 week later. He asked for the week off so he could prepare. His boss agreed and even offered to buy him a nice dinner soon. Once he was back home, Dong-hoon summoned his skeletons. He felt a deep sense of pride. His training was working. If his skeletons kept growing like this, he might even become an A-rank hunter one day. He started a new training session to test their power. He was shocked by the results. Even though his skeletons were technically D rank, they fought like C ranks. They were much stronger than he expected. However, there was a problem. His skeletons were now too strong for his old equipment. They smashed the wooden training scarecrows into pieces. He realized he would have to spend a lot of money on better gear. He also had a personal worry. His skeletons were strong, but he was still a weak human. If a monster managed to run past his skeletons, he would be in huge trouble. He needed to find a way to protect himself. Suddenly, his mage skeleton walked over to him. It pointed its wooden staff at Dong-hoon and cast a soft spell. It felt as if the skeleton could read his mind. The skeleton even nodded its head to comfort him. This was a huge discovery. In the past, the skeletons only followed simple orders. Now, they were starting to show their own personalities and opinions. Then, the tank skeleton walked up. It pointed toward the broken training gear. Dong-hyun looked at the skeleton, feeling confused. He knew his undead friends were trying to tell him something important, but he wasn't quite sure what it was yet. Dong-han watched his shield skeleton fight. It was stronger than all the others. With the Bone Knight helping, Dong-han realized he didn't need to buy expensive new equipment. To test his progress, Dong-han asked a skeleton named Bony 2 to attack him. He wanted to check his new air shield. Bony 2 struck him hard, but Dong-han wasn't hurt at all. He was very happy with the result and told the skeletons to keep training. Soon, a notification appeared. The skeletons were getting stronger. For the first time, Dong-hoon could see a status window for each skeleton individually. He noticed that Bony 1, Bony 2, and Bony 3 had better stats because of their hard work. Dong-hoon felt proud. His efforts were paying off. He decided to train them until they became the strongest skeletons in the world. Later, Dong-han went to a train station for a new job. He was working as a porter. He carried a heavy bag filled with a sleeping bag and emergency food. He joined a group of mercenaries waiting near a dungeon entrance. The dungeon was close to the station. A strange, dim energy hovered around it. It looked like a normal dungeon, but the hunters were nervous. They knew this one was very difficult. Many felt safe because a famous guild was leading them, but Dong-han didn't trust that. He knew many hunters vanished in dungeons, even when they were with big guilds. Famous hunters got all the glory, while lower-rank hunters were often forgotten. Still, Dong-han was willing to risk his life. While he was waiting, he heard a voice behind him. The person mentioned that he seemed like a D-rank hunter, even though his ID tag said he was only E-rank. Dong-hoon looked around, but the area was empty. He called out, asking who was there. A girl finally stepped out of the shadows. She questioned why he was hiding his true strength to work as a lowly porter. Dong-hoon was confused. He told her it didn't matter if he was D-rank or E-rank, because the guild was full of elite A-rank hunters. The girl didn't believe him. She thought he was a spy or an actor. Dong-hoon looked at her and saw she had a golden plate. This meant she was at least a C-rank hunter. Then he realized who she was. She was Gi Soyeol, known as the Dark Empress. She was one of the top hunters in South Korea and the sister of a powerful guild leader. Dong-hoon started to shake. She was a famous assassin, and people were terrified of making her angry. He was also a huge fan of hers. He tried to explain that he wasn't a spy and was just a normal guy. Suddenly, the girl started laughing. She told him she was just joking. Dong-hoon was shocked. He couldn't understand why a world-class hunter would play a prank on a total stranger like him. Dong-hoon felt a wave of anxiety wash over him. He wondered if Soy had performed a secret background check on him. Lately, he had been training his skeletons like a madman. Usually, that kind of intense activity would catch the eye of high-ranking hunters, which could be dangerous. However, having a ranker take an interest in you could also be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Soy looked at him and smiled brightly. She asked if he was flustered by her sudden approach. She quickly apologized for being rude, but her curiosity had gotten the better of her. She admitted that she found him fascinating. Dong-han wore an E-rank badge, the lowest level possible. Yet, she could sense that he had the skill to house 5 units of dark energy inside his body. Dong-han remained silent. There was nothing he could say because she was exactly right. He realized she had used a high-level energy detection skill to see his true strength. Soy then explained why she was talking to him. Her older brother had asked her to scout for a new expedition team. She needed a reliable porter, and she had just found a very suspicious one standing right in front of her. She asked Dong-hoon if he would volunteer for the scouting mission. She noted that he was the most capable porter she had ever seen. She also sensed that he wasn't the type of person to get scared and run away when things got tough. Dong-hoon started to sweat. He wasn't sure if he wanted to be in the spotlight. However, Soy promised to double his reward. For a protagonist who was completely broke, that was an offer he simply could not refuse. In this world, dungeons are ranked from E to S based on their difficulty. Interestingly, these ranks are not assigned by the system. Instead, humans have to judge the danger levels themselves. Even the famous S ranker, White Shadow, says there is no perfect way to know a dungeon's rank without going inside first. Some people try to guess by looking at the color of the dungeon's entrance. They believe that a darker color means a higher level of danger, but this method is often wrong. Because of this uncertainty, the Hunter Association created a standard. If a dungeon cannot be cleared by 5 or more hunters of a certain rank, the dungeon's rank is increased. For example, if 5 A-rank hunters fail to clear a cave, it becomes an official S-rank dungeon. This method is grim because it often requires someone to get hurt or sacrifice their life just to prove how dangerous a place is. The dungeon Dong-hoon was about to enter was one of these unranked mysteries. The association didn't want to risk their main powerhouses immediately, so they sent a scouting team first. Because of his new job, Dong-hoon got to experience the dungeon's atmosphere much sooner than other mercenaries. When he stepped inside, the first thing he saw was a massive cave. It was filled with glowing pearls that lit up the darkness. One of his teammates immediately suggested stealing the pearls to sell them for a high price. Luckily, another hunter warned him to stay back. They told him not to touch anything recklessly in an unknown environment. Most of the team felt very relaxed. Every member had an A-rank badge, and Soy was an S-ranker. They felt invincible. Soy ordered everyone to stay alert and look around. She assigned a guide named Kang Sunwook to watch over the porter. Sunwook was famous for his skills. The system had even given him the official title of guide because he was so good at finding exits and navigating traps. As the main group moved away, Sunwook asked Dong-hoon if he was nervous. Dong-hoon admitted that he was. Sunwook nodded and told him to keep that edge. He explained that this dungeon felt wrong. It was far too quiet. Usually, in a cave this size, you would hear the sounds of monsters or feel the vibrations of something moving. Here, there was only silence. Sunwook suspected there was a hidden gimmick or a secret trap. Dong-hoon was impressed by the guide's instincts. Sunwook bragged that he had been in this business for many years. However, as they walked further, even Sunwook began to feel uneasy. He said his body felt heavy and his skin was crawling. Dong-hoon felt the same chills running down his spine. He asked if they should really keep going. Sunwook hesitated. He had never felt a presence this terrifying before, not even when meeting other high rankers. It felt like a legendary, monstrous being was lurking nearby. Fearing for their lives, Sunwook turned to Dong-hoon. He knew Dong-hoon was a necromancer. He told him to summon his skeletons immediately so they would have at least a small chance of surviving what was coming. Dong-hoon summons 5 skeletons, using up half of his remaining energy. Although this is a significant display of his necromancer abilities, Sunwook shows no sign of being impressed. Instead, he senses an incredibly powerful presence ahead and tells Dong-hoon to continue toward an open area. He believes there are several powerful beings nearby, though he cannot tell whether they are monsters or another group of hunters until they get closer. As they move deeper into the dungeon, the atmosphere becomes overwhelmingly oppressive. The pressure is so intense that Dong-hoon struggles to keep his eyes open or even stand properly. One of his mage skeletons notices his condition and casts an air shield to protect him. However, The immense pressure destroys the shield the instant it appears, causing Dong-hun to cough up blood. Realizing that ordinary skills are useless against such overwhelming power, Dong-hun scolds the skeleton, but continues moving with the support of his summoned undead. Meanwhile, Sunwook walks far ahead with little difficulty, highlighting the enormous gap in their strength. Dong-hun begins to understand that this newly discovered dungeon is far more dangerous than anyone expected. Even an experienced A-rank hunter like Sunwook appears cautious, making Dong-hun realize just how deadly the situation is. His dream of becoming a powerful ranker suddenly feels meaningless if he cannot survive this dungeon first. After enduring the crushing pressure, Dong-hun receives a system notification announcing that he has entered a new stage. The notification identifies the boss as an elderly man with white hair, whose deep resentment is so intense that frost has formed in his hair. The system states that defeating this mysterious old man is the requirement for clearing the stage. Inside the chamber, Dong-hun and Sunwook encounter a group of exhausted hunters who are relieved to see them. Mistaking them for reinforcements, the survivors immediately ask for help. They recognize Sunwook's purple badge as proof that he is an A-rank hunter and also notice Dong-hun's skeleton summons, confirming he is a necromancer. Sunwook calmly distributes emergency food supplies while Dong-hun hands out food and water, realizing that he could easily end up trapped like these hunters if he makes a single mistake. One of the survivors, a B-rank hunter and the strongest among the remaining group, explains what happened. He describes the dungeon as a living nightmare, unlike anything he has encountered before. There is no exit, and every path eventually loops back to the same chamber, making escape impossible. Since they could not leave, the only option was to challenge the boss waiting beyond the door. The B-rank hunter explains that the old man is unbelievably powerful. Regardless of a challenger's rank, everyone is effortlessly defeated. However, instead of killing those who challenge him, the old man simply overpowers them, declares that they are not fit, and throws them back outside. None of the survivors understand what kind of test he is conducting, or what qualifies someone to pass it. Although the survivors remain hopeful that an A-rank hunter like Sunwook can succeed where they failed, Dong-hun is disturbed by another shocking revelation: the dungeon boss is a human rather than a monster. Since the world's transformation, no one has ever encountered a human serving as a dungeon boss. Unsure of what this means, Dong-hun realizes that the only way to uncover the truth and find a way out is to confront the mysterious old man and complete whatever trial awaits them. After meeting the trapped survivors, Dong-hun still finds it difficult to fully trust Sunwook, knowing that guides often have their own motives. While he is lost in thought, Soil and the rest of the reinforcement team arrive. After assessing the situation, Soil quickly concludes that the survivors are genuine and not doppelgangers or part of a trap. Although she is disturbed by the overwhelming aura surrounding the dungeon, she decides they cannot afford to wait any longer. The trapped hunters are relieved when they see members of the pairing guild, especially powerful A-rank hunters. However, Soil orders Dong-hun and the survivors to remain outside, while she and the other elite hunters confront the mysterious boss. Dong-hun knows there is an enormous gap between ordinary hunters and elite rankers. Soil herself is among the strongest A-rank hunters, making him confident that if anyone can succeed, it would be her team. Moments after entering the room, however, the impossible happens. In less than 10 minutes, the entire group is thrown back outside in defeat. Even Soil is badly injured and unable to continue fighting. Dong-hun is stunned that someone of her caliber could be defeated so effortlessly. Instead of being discouraged, Soil is furious because the old man dismisses her as not fit. Refusing to accept the result, she asks Dong-hun for a high-grade healing potion and immediately prepares to challenge the boss again. Dong-hun cannot understand why she would willingly return after suffering such a crushing defeat. Soil explains that the old man never kills his opponents. Instead, he simply defeats them, declares them unworthy, and sends them back. Determined to prove herself, she refuses to give up. As Dong-hun watches, he begins to suspect that the word fit has a deeper meaning. It reminds him of a master searching for a worthy disciple rather than an enemy trying to kill intruders. He wonders if the old man's resentment comes from failing to find someone capable of inheriting his legacy. Days pass, but Soil continues challenging the old man over and over again. Every attempt ends in the same defeat, leaving her covered in injuries, yet her determination never wavers. Even after 4 days of repeated failures, she refuses to quit, driven by pride and the desire to prove her worth. Dong-hun is impressed by the unwavering resolve of a true ranker, but also realizes that simply waiting will accomplish nothing. He even doubts that sending more powerful hunters, including multiple S-rankers, would be enough to defeat the old man. Eventually, Dong-hun notices that everyone trapped in the dungeon has already attempted the trial except him. Believing he should experience it himself, he approaches Soil and tells her he wants to enter the room. His request surprises everyone. The other hunters mock him, arguing that he is only a porter and has no place challenging an opponent who defeated elite rankers with ease. One hot-tempered hunter even reaches for his weapon, but Soil stops him before the situation escalates. She asks Dong-hun whether his decision is driven by a lack of trust in her abilities. Dong-hun calmly denies this, explaining that he simply wants to understand the trial for himself. Soil reminds him that, according to their contract, he is only a porter responsible for carrying supplies and has no authority to interfere in dungeon exploration. Still, curious about his determination, she asks why he insists on challenging a trial that even the strongest hunters have failed to overcome. Dong-hun shares his theory about the dungeon's mysterious boss. He believes the old man's repeated statement that challengers are not fit is more than an insult. Instead of judging their current strength, the old man may be searching for someone with the potential to become his disciple. According to Dong-hun, a worthy successor does not have to be the strongest person alive, but someone capable of inheriting the old man's knowledge and growing stronger in the future. If this is true, defeating the boss may not be the actual way to clear the dungeon. Soil questions his idea and asks if he intends to make the old man his master instead of defeating him. Dong-hun explains that some dungeons have hidden conditions or alternative ways to clear them, and this could be one of those cases. Soil then asks whether he believes he has greater potential than she does. Realizing the conversation is becoming tense, Dong-hun quickly denies it. He explains that everyone else has already faced the trial and experienced failure, while he is the only one who has not entered yet. Since all other options have failed, he believes it is worth trying a different approach. His answer satisfies Soil, who admits she has been watching him from the beginning. She says he has the eyes of someone always searching for opportunities, like a wolf stalking its prey. She even guesses that he is interested in the dungeon's hidden rewards or hoping to gain an unexpected opportunity. Impressed by how accurately she reads him, Dong-hun jokingly thinks she would make a better fortune teller than a hunter. With no better plan available and their emergency supplies running low, Soil finally gives him permission to enter. However, she warns that he only has one chance because the group cannot afford to stay trapped much longer. As Dong-hun steps through the door, several system notifications appear. A flash of light transports him into a dark chamber where the overwhelming aura nearly forces him to the ground. The old man dismisses him immediately, saying someone so weak is not even worth his attention. Simply opening his eyes creates an unbearable pressure that almost crushes Dong-hun. At that moment, the system activates a hidden condition linked to Dong-hun's cursed Necromancer class. He unexpectedly unlocks the S-rank skill Memory Recreation, allowing him to experience the memories of the old man, known as the Master of All Techniques. Another flash of light transports Dong-hun into a snowy landscape inside the old man's memories. There, he witnesses the master's deep sorrow and loneliness. Despite mastering every martial art and reaching the pinnacle of power through perfect control of ki, the old man could not escape old age. His greatest regret is not dying, but failing to find a talented disciple worthy of inheriting everything he has spent his life achieving. After experiencing the old master's memories, Dong-hoon finally understands the source of the man's overwhelming resentment. The old master had reached the end of his life without finding anyone worthy of inheriting his martial arts. Unwilling to let his life's work disappear, he made the painful decision to sell his soul so that his complete self and all of his knowledge could remain behind, waiting for a suitable successor. When the memory ends, Dong-hoon is transported back to the dark chamber. The crushing pressure immediately returns as the master of all techniques stares at him. Although the immense aura makes it difficult to breathe, Dong-hoon no longer feels hopeless because he now understands what the old man truly desires. The old master quickly realizes that Dong-hoon has witnessed his memories and becomes curious about him. Dong-hoon openly admits that he saw everything and boldly declares that he wishes to inherit the master's techniques and knowledge. The old man dismisses him, saying he is only slightly interesting but far from qualified. He increases the pressure even further in an attempt to force Dong-hoon to give up. Instead of backing down, Dong-hoon argues that the old man's impossible standards are the reason he has remained alone for so long. If he continues rejecting everyone, no one will remember him as a legendary martial artist. Instead, they will only remember him as a stubborn ghost consumed by regret. Offended by the criticism, the old man prepares to punish Dong-hoon by breaking his leg. Before he can act, Dong-hoon asks for one chance to explain himself. He points out that the old master mastered every martial art in existence, while people in the current era struggle to master even a single technique during their entire lives. Expecting another genius with the same talent is simply unrealistic. The old man refuses to believe that no such person exists. To prove his point, Dong-hoon explains that the woman who challenged him earlier, Ji-soy, is considered one of the strongest hunters in the world. Although Dong-hoon personally admires her strength, the old master is shocked that someone of her level is regarded as exceptional. Believing Dong-hoon may be lying, the old man looks into his eyes and realizes he is telling the truth. Reluctantly, he accepts that the world's standards have changed dramatically. Seeing an opportunity, Dong-hoon offers a different solution. Since no human can satisfy the master's expectations, he asks the old man to pass his knowledge to him. The master calls him shameless, assuming Dong-hoon wants special treatment. However, Dong-hoon quickly clarifies that he is not asking to become the disciple directly. Instead, he summons his skeletons and presents them as candidates. He explains that his undead servants possess limitless growth potential, each has unique talents, and they never feel pain or exhaustion. Because of these qualities, they could learn the master's techniques more effectively than ordinary humans. Since Dong-hoon controls the skeletons, everything they learn will ultimately become his inheritance as well, allowing the old man's legacy to survive through a single successor. The old master carefully studies the skeletons in silence. Dong-hoon grows nervous, fearing his proposal has failed. Then, to his relief, the old man begins to smile. He finds it ironic that the disciples he spent his entire life searching for are not humans at all, but undead warriors. Recognizing that the skeletons must have been exceptional fighters in life and seeing their extraordinary potential, he decides to accept them despite originally wanting only one disciple. By earning the master's approval instead of defeating him, Dong-hoon fulfills the dungeon's hidden clear condition. The old man asks him to promise that he will inherit all of his techniques, overcome every trial ahead, and leave his legacy somewhere in the world. Dong-hoon solemnly makes the promise without hesitation. Satisfied at last, the old master smiles in peace and the system confirms that Dong-hoon has successfully cleared the hidden stage by being recognized as the successor to the master of all techniques. Dong-hoon wakes up in a hospital bed with no memory of how he ended up there. When he gets up, he finds Soil, the Vice Guild Master of the Pang Guild and the famous Dark Empress, waiting in his room. Although Dong-hoon already knows her identity, he is confused about why someone as powerful as her has come to see him. Soil explains that she was surprised by what happened inside the dungeon. She originally believed the boss was impossible to defeat, yet a mere porter somehow cleared it. She is curious about how Dong-hoon accomplished such a feat and whether he truly became the old man's disciple. Dong-hoon understands her suspicion because, from her perspective, he was just an outsider who unexpectedly took the achievement of a dungeon that belonged to her guild. A less patient ranker might have even attacked him for interfering with their victory. Before answering, Dong-hoon asks what the public knows about the dungeon. Soil reveals that the news reported the Pang Guild's advance team successfully cleared the dungeon and that all survivors signed confidentiality agreements. Dong-hoon feels relieved because his involvement remains hidden. He thanks her, but Soil says she is not doing it only for him. Protecting the guild's reputation also matters because no one would believe that a porter, rather than elite rankers, was actually responsible for clearing such a difficult dungeon. Dong-hoon realizes that the guild is hiding the truth to maintain their pride. If he reveals that he was the real person who cleared the dungeon, he could put himself in danger. Soil also informs him that he had been unconscious for 3 days after leaving the dungeon. When she asks about the reward he received, Dong-hoon avoids giving details. He tells her that he has not fully figured it out yet and needs time to understand his gains. He assures her that he has no intention of running away, knowing that someone like the Dark Empress would easily find him if he tried. After observing him for a moment, Soil accepts his answer and leaves. Once alone, Dong-hoon reflects on how unbelievable his life has become. After waking up from a 3-year coma, he met powerful hunters, entered a strange dungeon, and somehow became involved with one of the strongest guilds. He realizes that one wrong move could create serious problems for him. He then checks his dungeon rewards through the system. To his surprise, his maximum energy permanently increases by 20 points, and he gains an S-rank skill called Teaching of All Techniques. Dong-hoon is overwhelmed with happiness because he now possesses 3 skills, 2 of which are S-rank abilities. Although he also receives the ability to read the memories of the dead, he is unsure how useful that skill will be. However, when he examines the details of the teaching skill, he immediately becomes excited. Without wasting time, he leaves the room and activates the ability. Using the skill, Dong-hoon summons the spirit of the old master. The master of all techniques appears before him, looking surprisingly pleased to be given another chance to exist. For Dong-hoon, this marks the beginning of a new chapter where he can finally learn from the legendary master and unlock the true potential of his abilities. Dong-hoon is thrilled to see the old master again after summoning him through his new skill, but his excitement quickly turns into pain when the old man punches him for calling him so late. The master complains that Dong-hoon is lazy and slow, but Dong-hoon explains that he summoned him immediately after regaining consciousness. He is confused about how the old man can physically hit him, despite being unable to affect the real world. The master explains that because they are connected through his skill, he can interact with Dong-hoon mentally and even cause him pain. The old man immediately wants to begin training. However, when Dong-hoon prepares to summon his skeletons, the master stops him and says they must first decide what Dong-hoon himself will learn. Although the old man recognizes the incredible potential of the skeletons, he believes the bigger problem is Dong-hoon. The master explains that he earned his title by mastering and perfecting countless techniques, meaning Dong-hoon's growth depends entirely on his ability to learn. Dong-hoon tries to argue that his talent is poor, but the old man refuses to accept that excuse. He claims that even someone with no talent can be transformed into a genius through his methods. The master is excited because, after becoming a spirit, he can finally use techniques he created, but never had the chance to try. Dong-hoon becomes nervous when he hears that the training may be painful, but the old man assures him that his stubborn personality should help him survive. The master introduces his ultimate technique, the Celestial Artisan, a method capable of turning someone with terrible potential into a genius. Dong-hoon wonders why the old man never used such a technique earlier, but the master explains that it requires an enormous amount of life energy as payment. If he had used it on a completely hopeless student before, his own body would have been destroyed. When Dong-hoon asks why he can use it now, the old man explains that death has removed that limitation. However, he also insults Dong-hoon, saying the technique only works best on someone with extremely poor talent. The master compares Dong-hoon's body to food waste, explaining that his lack of talent is actually an advantage because his body is untouched by other energies and easier to reshape. People with natural talent are already influenced by their own abilities, making them harder to transform. Despite the harsh insults, Dong-hoon realizes the old man's logic makes sense. He becomes excited by the possibility of improving himself alongside his growing skeleton army. When asked if he is ready, Dong-hoon confidently agrees. The training begins, and Dong-hoon quickly discovers that the old man's methods are far more brutal than expected. He struggles through the pain while motivating himself with the dream of becoming a powerful ranker. The master acknowledges his determination and increases the intensity of the training. Despite suffering through extreme pain, Dong-hoon manages to endure long enough to gain a new C-rank skill that improves his pain resistance. After pushing him to his limit, the old man finally stops the session and declares that the first stage of the Celestial Artisan training is complete. Exhausted and barely able to move, Dong-hoon receives a rare compliment from the master. Although he is far from perfect, he is not completely hopeless. For the first time, Dong-hoon begins his journey toward becoming stronger under the guidance of the legendary master of all techniques. Dong-hoon thinks his brutal training session is finally over, but the old master tells him there are still 30 minutes left. The old man picks him up and points toward his waiting skeletons, forcing him to continue. Dong-hoon is already exhausted and feels like he cannot survive any more training. The old master explains that physical strength is the foundation of every profession. So he begins by teaching proper posture. The skeletons easily copy the movements, but Dong-hoon struggles because his body has already been pushed to its limit. Despite insulting him for having poor talent, the old man admits that Dong-hoon has impressive determination. He explains that a master should never be weaker than their own summoned creatures, and Dong-hoon understands that he needs to become stronger if he wants to lead his skeleton army. Although Dong-hoon's muscles are damaged and his body is completely exhausted, he continues enduring the painful training because he wants to improve. Eventually, the old man decides the session is finished and orders him to repeat the same physical training every morning. When the teaching skill ends, the old master disappears, leaving Dong-hoon collapsed on the floor. His skeletons gather around him, and he asks one of them to carry him back. When Dong-hoon returns, his guild leader informs him that the survivors from the previous dungeon expedition have come to visit. Dong-hoon recognizes them, and they happily greet him. They notice that he looks healthier and more muscular than before. Dong-hoon then realizes that his body has actually changed from the intense training, with his shoulders becoming broader and his physical structure improving. The hunters explain that they came because they want to invite him on another dungeon expedition. A C-rank hunter named Kang Jo introduces himself and says he was impressed by Dong-hoon's actions during the previous dungeon. Because of his attitude and reliability, Kang Jo considered him someone worth teaming up with. Dong-hoon reminds them that he is only an E-rank Necromancer mercenary, but the hunters do not care about his rank. They need him for a C-rank dungeon that offers good rewards. They also know he needs money, which embarrasses Dong-hoon because the guild leader revealed his financial struggles. Kang-jo explains that although the dungeon is difficult for a C-rank team, the rewards are valuable. One possible reward is a rare power potion, a special item capable of curing severe curses and illnesses. Dong-han becomes interested immediately because such potions are extremely valuable regardless of dungeon rank. When Kang-jo offers him a fair share of the profits, Dong-han calculates the possible earnings. If the rare potion appears, it could be worth around 50 million, giving him a significant amount from his share. Excited by the opportunity to earn money, gain experience, and test his improved skeletons, Dong-hoon quickly accepts. The hunters tell him to meet them at the dungeon location on Monday, ending their discussion. Later, Dong-hoon explains the situation to the old master. He says that hunters grow stronger by challenging dungeons. The old man finds it amusing that humans are trying to become stronger without mastering the basics first. But he understands Dong-hoon's reasoning. He agrees that real battles provide valuable experience. Dong-hoon feels relieved, but the old master gives him a warning. Skipping training will not be tolerated because he can summon himself even inside dungeons. He then prepares to continue Dong-hoon's painful training methods, leaving Dong-hoon terrified as he realizes the brutal massage is about to begin again. After another intense training session, Dong-hoon is completely exhausted and covered in pain. He believes he only survived because of his newly acquired skill that reduces his sense of pain when things become unbearable. Although the training is brutal, he is happy that the skill can grow stronger over time. The old master even praises his endurance, but when Dong-hoon thanks him, the old man casually says they can increase the training intensity starting tomorrow. Dong-hoon immediately panics, but the old master ignores his reaction and moves on to the next lesson. The old master gathers Dong-hoon and his skeletons and tells them to take the same posture as before. He announces that he will teach each of them a new technique every day. His first target is the sword skeleton, but the skeleton looks confused because it does not have any sword skills yet. The old master explains that skills are not something they are simply born with, they can be developed through practice. He orders the sword skeleton to start swinging a sword. However, the skeleton is terrified because it remembers how painful Dong-hoon's training has been. Seeing its fear, Dong-hoon realizes that even his own experience has become a source of motivation for the skeleton. While the skeleton practices, the old master asks Dong-hoon what he believes swordsmanship actually is. Dong-hoon gives a simple answer, a technique that uses a sword. The old man expected that answer and explains that swordsmanship is exactly that, the ability to properly handle a sword. There is no need to make it overly complicated. The old master then tells Dong-han to pick up a wooden sword. Dong-han realizes that the master is not only planning to teach the skeletons, but also wants him to inherit these techniques as well. Following the master's instructions, he swings the sword naturally without overthinking. Surprisingly, the old master praises his swing. Dong-hoon is shocked because he is not used to receiving compliments after constantly being called talentless. The old master explains that his slash was based on his own natural movement. He could feel that Dong-hoon put all his effort and determination into that single strike. The master asks whether the slash could become stronger if Dong-hoon added more speed and power. When Dong-hoon looks confused, the old man explains that any attack becomes more powerful when strength and speed are added. Dong-hoon finally understands the lesson. Instead of copying a perfect sword stance, he needs to create his own style and improve the power behind his movements. The old master begins explaining the deeper principles of swordsmanship to both Dong-hoon and the sword skeleton. Rather than focusing only on theories, he demonstrates with his own powerful slash. He explains that true swordsmanship comes from mastering the basics and continuously improving one's own strike. The old master tells Dong-hoon that if he perfects his unique slash, it could eventually become a standard technique that others follow. Inspired by this idea, Dong-hoon becomes motivated. He realizes that his posture and appearance are not what matter most. The true strength comes from the intent, power, and skill behind his attack. Determined to improve, Dong-hoon continues practicing the sword technique. Through his efforts and the master's guidance, he successfully learns a new C-rank skill, marking the beginning of his journey toward developing his own unique fighting style. The chapter begins in the fancy office of the Blue Guild. We see Ki Parang, who is a famous hunter ranked 58th in the world. He is busy with paperwork until his sister So-yul comes in. She looks very worried. She asks him a strange question: can a weak D-rank hunter suddenly become as strong as a top-ranked hero? Parang thinks about it and says it is very unlikely. He explains that even if someone gets a lucky new skill, it takes a long time to learn how to use it. He tells her that if someone seems that strong, they were probably hiding their true power from the start. This answer makes So-yul feel even more confused and a bit embarrassed. She is a high-level assassin, but she recently lost a fight to a dungeon boss that the main character cleared easily. She is blushing because she can't bring herself to tell her brother that she was beaten by a ghost old man boss. She realizes that even her special detection skill couldn't see the main character's true strength. She decides to keep his secret for now and just watch him from a distance to see what he does next. The scene shifts to a green forest where a blue dungeon gate has appeared. Our main character arrives looking very calm. He is wearing his signature dark cloak. He meets up with a team of hunters who are getting ready to enter a C-rank dungeon. The main character is very practical. He tells the leader that he applied sunscreen and brought ice water because he knew the dungeon would be a desert. The leader is impressed by his preparation. He also introduces 2 extra F-rank porters who are there to carry heavy items and loot. The main character isn't worried. He knows his skeletons have leveled up and can easily handle tough monsters like orcs, so he feels ready for this C-rank challenge. As soon as the group steps through the portal, the world turns into a giant burning desert. The sun is incredibly hot. A blue system screen pops up with a warning: harsh conditions detected. All stats are reduced by 10%. This is a big problem for the normal hunters. The porters are already struggling to breathe, and the warriors are covered in sweat. They find it hard to even move. However, the main character is perfectly fine. He thinks back to the hellish training he did with a ghost elder. That training was much hotter and more painful than this desert. To him, the heat feels like a relaxing sauna rather than a threat. It's time to show off his power. The main character uses his skill, Awakened Skeleton Summon. 4 skeletons burst out of the sand with a flash of purple light. These aren't the thin, weak skeletons you see in most stories. These skeletons look like elite soldiers. They have glowing eyes and carry strong shields and magic staffs. The other hunters in the group are shocked. They can feel the heavy pressure and strength coming from the skeletons. Even the team leader notices that the summons feel much more powerful than the last time they worked together. The team leader tells everyone to stay alert. He says the monsters here are mostly scorpions and snakes, and they are very dangerous. Just then, the sand starts to move. A giant sharp stinger crashes out of the ground, nearly hitting one of the hunters. A massive C-rank desert scorpion emerges from the dunes. It is covered in thick armor and looks terrifying. The leader yells for everyone to get into a battle formation. He warns the team that these scorpions are just as strong as the elite orcs they faced before. While the other hunters are panicking and scrambling to defend themselves, the main character remains totally calm. He doesn't even draw a weapon. Instead, he looks at his lead skeleton, whom he calls Bone Boy. This skeleton is a mage. The main character gives a simple command. Cast air shield on me. The skeleton mage taps its staff on the ground, and a huge glowing purple barrier appears. It blocks the heat and protects the group from the scorpion's attacks. With his defense ready, the main character smiles and tells his skeletons to go and wipe out all the enemies. The skeletons charge forward, ready to win the fight. The chapter opens in the middle of a battle in a desert dungeon. Our main character, a necromancer, is fighting an army of monsters using his own skeleton warriors. One giant skeleton uses a skill to grab and control enemies, while another skeleton fighter swings a sword to smash through a giant scorpion enemy. The fight looks tough, but our hero stays calm and focused the whole time. As the battle continues, his skeleton army starts wiping out group after group of enemies with ease. Our necromancer even laughs a little, saying this dungeon is easier than he expected. Watching this, another hunter in his party gets amazed and says bone creatures are really something. Then jokingly asks if the necromancer just got lucky. Our hero brushes it off, saying it worked because he took down the bigger groups first. But the other hunter keeps teasing him about luck, which clearly annoys him. Later, walking away from the group, the necromancer starts thinking to himself. He's getting really irritated by everyone constantly saying he just got lucky. He knows the truth is different. Every one of his skills is powerful, and they don't need to hire low-rank hunters as backup at all. The real reason he keeps getting rewards is from clearing high-level dungeons, but there's a problem. He signed a confidentiality agreement with someone called Blue, so he can't openly explain any of this. Because of that agreement, the other hunters can't directly ask him questions either. So there's only one way left for them to figure out his secret, and that's by exploring dungeons together with him and watching closely. Then the story shifts to a serious warning. Two characters talk about how dungeon accidents happen more often than car accidents, and there are no cameras and no evidence left behind afterward. This hints that something dangerous might be being planned. The necromancer, walking with his skeleton companion, says it's better to stay cautious for now, since it's still just a suspicion. The chapter then jumps into a new dungeon, chapter 14, called The Ancient Desert Scorpion King. Inside, they find an altar with the seal of the Scorpion King. A message appears saying that to break this seal, they must offer a sacrifice on two separate altars. The catch is brutal. The sacrifice has to be a living hunter of F rank or higher, meaning a real person. The reaction from the group is instant panic. Some hunters yell out that this can't be true, refusing to believe they actually need to sacrifice a living person. Our necromancer stays calm and simply says he never heard about this condition before. One character gets nervous, realizing this is a troublesome type of dungeon quest, while others start panicking, wondering how they're even supposed to find a sacrifice out here in the middle of a desert. Things get darker fast. A woman is being dragged forward, terrified, asking why this is happening to her. The party leader coldly explains that the dungeon requires two living F-rank or higher hunters as a sacrifice, acting like it's a simple rule to follow, not a horrifying decision. The woman screams, calling them all crazy, but the party leader just replies that, if it's easier for her to think of it that way, she's welcome to. Then, the twist becomes clear. This was planned from the very beginning. The party leader admits he brought the necromancer here on purpose, using the dungeon exploration as a trap all along. He reveals that they already knew the necromancer didn't clear his past dungeon by luck, and they only pretended to be curious to get him here. But then he makes an offer. He says they don't actually intend to oppose the necromancer. Instead, they want to join him and share in his luck, meaning his rewards and power, as long as they split things fairly as a team. The necromancer just stares at them in silence, clearly disgusted by the whole scheme, the fake friendliness, and the willingness to sacrifice innocent people just to get closer to him. In the end, he gives his answer without hesitation, coldly telling them to eat dirt, fully rejecting their offer and showing he has no interest in joining people willing to do something this cruel.
The villains tell Dong Han to join their side and hand over the reward he received from the dungeon. Of course, Dong Han refuses. Instead, he summons Boney 3 and orders him to attack. The fight begins immediately. The two weaker enemies panic, but Ji-ho stays calm. He easily cuts down every arrow fired at him and warns Dong Han that he will regret making this choice. Dong Han laughs at the idea of working with people like them. He says he would never join a group of animals. His skeletons rush forward and clash with the enemy. Ji-ho believes Dong Han has become overconfident after getting lucky once. He attacks with full force, and Dong Han quickly realizes that Ji-ho is much stronger than he expected. Even though Ji-ho is officially a C-rank hunter, his real strength is close to a B rank. The battle becomes harder and harder. Just when Dong Han thinks he might have a chance, Ji-ho reveals that he is not their biggest problem. Suddenly, Dong Han senses an overwhelming killing intent. He quickly warns Boney 1, but even the powerful skeleton struggles under the pressure. A new person slowly walks out from behind Ji-ho. Ji-ho introduces him as an A-rank assassin from the Shadow Lurkers. The assassin looks at Dong Han with curiosity. He asks if this ordinary-looking hunter is really the person who cleared the dungeon that even Guy Soy failed to conquer. Dong Han knows the situation is hopeless. The only reason he survived this long was because of pure luck. Fighting B-rank hunters was already difficult enough. Now an A-rank assassin has appeared. The two girls with Dong Han apologize for dragging him into this mess. They thank him for helping them and believe they are all about to die. Seeing their hopeless expressions, Dong Han feels sorry for them. They are only suffering because they are too weak. He decides that no matter what happens, he will try to save them. But how can he defeat an A-rank assassin? Dong Han remembers his special teaching skill. He activates it and summons the mysterious Old Master. The old man appears with an annoyed expression. He says he already expected something like this to happen because Dong Han is still an inexperienced hunter. Dong Han quickly asks for advice, saying the situation is urgent. The old man simply tells him to accept his fate. According to him, Dong Han has no chance of defeating enemies like these. He even complains that it is embarrassing to have such a weak disciple. Dong Han argues back. He reminds the old man that if he dies here, the old man's dream will never come true. The old master sighs and scolds him for getting himself into such a dangerous situation in the first place. He says that even if someone masters every technique in the world, they still cannot perform miracles. While they're talking, the assassin interrupts them. He asks Dong Han a simple question. What exactly did you receive from the dungeon? At that moment, Dong Han finally understands the real reason they attacked him. They are not here to kill him immediately. They only want the secret reward he obtained after clearing the dungeon. That realization gives Dong Han an idea. If they truly wanted him dead, they would have already killed him. Since they need information from him, they cannot afford to act carelessly. Even the old master looks impressed after hearing Dong Han's plan. Dong Han smiles and asks the assassin if he really wants to know about his reward. The assassin admits that he does. After all, it came from a dungeon that even Guy Soy failed to clear. Dong Han agrees to reveal everything. However, he has one condition. First, he wants revenge on the hunters who betrayed him. He says the anger and humiliation inside him are too great. Unless he settles the score with those backstabbers, he cannot calmly explain anything. He even tells them that if they refuse, they can simply kill him instead. The assassin stays silent, carefully thinking about the offer. The two girls become even more frightened because they cannot understand what Dong Han is trying to do. Dong Han jokingly says he has a strange obsession with protecting his pride. No matter how dangerous the situation is, he refuses to let those who betrayed him walk away without paying the price. The assassin still believes Dong Han is planning something. Dong Han immediately denies it. He says there is no way he could fool the eyes of an A-rank hunter. That answer makes enough sense to the assassin, but Ji-ho starts feeling nervous. Dong Han continues speaking. He admits that he knows he cannot escape from the shadow lurkers. He accepts that this might be the end for him. But before he dies, he promises that he will make the traitors suffer. To prove he is serious, Dong Han even threatens to take his own life before revealing the secret if they do not agree to his condition. The villains quickly stop him. The assassin finally makes his decision. He gives Dong Han 30 minutes to settle his personal grudge. But he also warns him that if he tries anything foolish, his life will end the moment the time is up. Dong Han accepts the assassin's condition, but Ji-ho is furious. He trembles with anger, unable to accept what is happening. At the same time, the old master finally decides to help Dong Han. He says this will be practical training. However, he reminds Dong Han that the biggest threat is still the A-rank assassin. To survive, he must save as much energy as possible before facing him. The old master teaches Dong Han a simple strategy. Instead of fighting with pure strength, he should use his opponent's own power against them. Dong Han quickly understands the lesson and thanks his master. Without wasting another second, Dong Han orders his skeletons to attack. The battle begins. This time, the skeletons have the advantage. The mage skeleton fires powerful fireballs that force the enemies back. Meanwhile, the sword skeleton blocks Ji-ho's attacks and pushes him across the battlefield. Watching the fight, even the A-rank assassin is impressed. He notices that the skeletons fight with perfect movements. Their attacks are clean, precise, and well-coordinated. For a moment, he thinks Dong Han might actually win this battle. But suddenly, the assassin senses someone's presence near the dungeon entrance. His expression changes immediately. He wonders if someone is standing outside and watching them. Meanwhile, Ji-ho is badly injured. He struggles to crawl away, hoping to escape. Before he can get far, Dong Han steps in front of him. Ji-ho freezes in fear. The old master watches everything calmly. He says these enemies are far too weak to count as real combat training. Still, he admits it is a decent start for Dong Han. Dong Han smiles and says he will get real battle experience when he fights the A-rank assassin. The old master immediately scolds him. He tells Dong Han not to get overconfident because he is nowhere near strong enough to defeat an A-rank hunter. Dong Han prepares to give another order to Bony One. Before he can speak, he feels another powerful presence entering the dungeon. The old master senses it too. He tells Dong Han that another person with strength similar to the assassin has just arrived. Then he scolds him again for failing to think ahead. Dong Han cannot argue. He knows the old master is right. He has already used most of his tricks. Compared to the strongest hunters, he is still just a beginner. For a moment, Dong Han starts questioning every decision he has made. On the other hand, Ji-ho suddenly bursts into laughter. He believes the new arrival is their backup, and now Dong Han has no chance of surviving. Dong Han also thinks he should escape before things get even worse. But then something unexpected happens. The newcomer is not here to fight. Instead, he rushes over with an urgent warning. Gai Soi is here. The moment everyone hears that name, the atmosphere changes completely. Dong Han is shocked. Even the A-rank assassins panic. Without saying another word, they decide to retreat immediately. They abandon Ji-ho and run away without looking back. Dong Han cannot believe what he is seeing. For the first time, he witnesses the overwhelming influence of an S-rank hunter. Outside the dungeon, Gai Soi quietly waits near the entrance. She begins wondering if she has gone too far by following Dong Han all the way here. It almost feels like she is secretly stalking him. Using the information she received from Pang, she was able to find this dungeon. Still, she remembers that Dong Han promised he would explain everything after taking care of his business. Thinking she may be overreacting, she decides to wait a little longer before leaving. Back inside the dungeon, Ji-ho's followers are being completely defeated by Dong Han skeletons. One after another, they fall to the ground. Ji-ho knows he is losing. Even so, he refuses to die here. He desperately searches for any way to survive. As the battle continues, Dong Han notices something strange. Ji-ho already knows he cannot defeat him in a direct fight. That means he must be planning something else. Dong-hun quickly realizes Ji-ho's real target is not him. His eyes are locked on the helpless porter standing behind Dong-hun. Dong-hun gives Bonnie a command. In an instant, the skeleton ambushes Ji-ho and cuts off one of his arms. Ji-ho lets out a painful scream and falls to the ground. But Dong-hun feels no pity. He knows that if their positions were reversed, Ji-ho would never have shown him mercy. Dong-hun slowly walks toward his defeated enemy and looks down at him. Ji-ho curses him with all his strength and tries to attack one last time. Before he can reach Dong-hun, Bonnie swings his sword again and cuts off another one of Ji-ho's limbs. Ji-ho crashes to the ground, screaming in pain. Even then, he continues insulting Dong-hun. He angrily asks why Dong-hun had to get in his way. Dong-hun calmly replies that Ji-ho was the one who came after him first. Hearing those words, Ji-ho loses all hope. He begs Dong-hun to kill him. But Dong-hun refuses. "You won't die that easily," he says. Ji-ho grits his teeth and keeps demanding death, but Bonnie ignores him. The skeleton grabs Ji-ho and drags him toward the large stone altar. Dong-hun remembers what he learned earlier. To open the boss room, the dungeon requires 2 living sacrifices. After Ji-ho and the other sacrifice are placed on the altar, the dungeon system checks whether both are still alive. The conditions are fulfilled. Dong-hun thinks back to how things could have gone differently. If Ji-ho had never attacked him, he would have simply left the dungeon without clearing it. But now everything has changed. Dong-hun believes in one simple rule. He repays kindness with kindness, and he repays evil with revenge. Anyone who tries to take his life should be ready to lose their own. As soon as the conditions are met, the ancient seal begins to break. The massive stone door slowly opens. Dong-hun quietly wishes that the 2 sacrifices will have better lives in their next reincarnation. Then he thinks about Gai Soi. She still has not arrived. The shadow lurkers ran away the moment they heard she was nearby. If they had stayed, Dong-hun would have been forced to fight 2 A-rank assassins at the same time. In that case, he might have become the sacrifice instead. The giant door finally opens completely. The moment it does, an overwhelming pressure fills the entire dungeon. Dong-hun freezes. A terrifying roar echoes through the room. The Scorpion King, who had been sealed away for countless years, unleashes its rage. Its terrifying presence shakes the entire dungeon. Even Dong-hun's skeletons cannot resist the pressure. The system immediately announces a penalty. Because of the monster's overwhelming aura, every skeleton's stats are reduced by 20%. Dong-hun realizes this boss is far stronger than anything he has faced before. One of the porters looks at him with fear and asks if they can really win. Dong-hun forces a smile. He says that, compared to fighting 2 A-rank assassins, this situation is actually better. The girl nervously nods, although she is still frightened. Dong-hun takes a deep breath and prepares himself. Just then, the old master appears behind him. He casually says that Dong-hun does not need his help against such a weak creature. According to the old man, if Dong-hun cannot defeat a monster like this by himself, then he might as well give up. Dong-hun stares at him in disbelief. He asks the old man to stop making jokes during such a dangerous moment. But the old master is completely serious. Without another word, he turns around and leaves. Dong-hun feels completely betrayed. A second later, the system explains what happened. The teaching skill has reached its time limit and has ended. Now Dong-hun is truly alone. He slowly raises his head and looks at the gigantic Scorpion King. The monster lets out another deafening screech that echoes throughout the dungeon. Dong-hun tightens his grip on his weapon. No one is coming to save him. In the end, he must defeat this terrifying monster with his own strength. Dong-hun takes a deep breath and prepares himself for the battle ahead. With his skeleton army beside him, he slowly walks toward the boss room. As soon as they enter, he notices something strange. The Scorpion King is nowhere to be seen. Dong-hun immediately becomes alert. He realizes that a giant scorpion would most likely attack from underground. To prepare for that, he orders Bonnie 5 to cast an air shield around the group. Then he tells the rest of his skeletons to spread out and form a battle formation. The moment everyone gets into position, the ground suddenly shakes. Just as Dong Hun expected, the Scorpion King bursts out from beneath the ground. Surprisingly, it ignores Dong Hun completely. Instead, it charges straight at Bonnie 3. Seeing this, Dong Hun realizes something important. This monster is intelligent. It is choosing its targets carefully instead of attacking randomly. The Scorpion King then turns toward the other skeletons. Dong Hun quickly reacts. He orders Bonnie 4 to use its special skill and draw the monster's attention. The plan works. The Scorpion King changes its target and rushes toward Bonnie 4. At the perfect moment, Bonnie 4 activates its block skill and stops the monster's charge. Dong Hun smiles. This is exactly the opening he was waiting for. He immediately orders every skeleton to attack at the same time. Dong Hun is not interested in searching for the monster's weak point. He believes that even the strongest enemy will struggle when surrounded by a group. The skeleton army attacks from every direction. The Scorpion King fights back fiercely. With one powerful swing, it throws several skeletons across the battlefield. Even so, Dong Hun notices something encouraging. Their attacks are slowly damaging the boss. The damage may not be huge, but it is adding up little by little. Without hesitation, Dong Hun gives another command. He tells every skeleton to keep attacking without worrying about being destroyed. Right now, he still has 50 energy remaining. As long as he has enough energy, he can simply summon any fallen skeleton again. That makes his army almost impossible to wipe out. Whenever one skeleton is destroyed, Dong Hun immediately summons it back into the battle. Again and again, his endless army continues attacking the Scorpion King. No matter how many skeletons it defeats, more keep returning. Eventually, the ancient monster can no longer keep up. After a long and exhausting fight, the ancient desert Scorpion King finally collapses. The boss has been defeated. Dong Hun lets out a deep sigh of relief. When he checks his energy, only 10 points remain. He realizes they barely won. If the Scorpion King had survived even a little longer, he would have run out of energy and lost the battle. The victory also makes his skeletons stronger. Because they defeated a powerful boss, their stats and skills improve. Then the system announces Dong Hun's reward. He receives the ancient desert Scorpion King's venom gland. At first, Dong Hun thinks it is nothing more than a crafting material. But the system explains that the gland contains around 20 different deadly poisons. It can be used to create powerful equipment or become an ingredient for learning new skills. Suddenly, Bonnie 3 begins reacting to the venom gland. The system announces that a hidden condition has been fulfilled. Dong Hun is surprised. He never knew skills could be unlocked this way. At that moment, Bonnie 3 learns a brand new ability called Poison Arrow. Now Dong Hun finally understands why the Dark Lord was always telling him to clear more dungeons. Each dungeon can contain hidden rewards that make his skeleton army much stronger. With the boss defeated and the hidden reward obtained, the dungeon is officially cleared. Everyone safely returns outside. The porters are overjoyed to be alive. They thank Dong Hun for saving them. Dong Hun simply tells them to be more careful before entering dangerous dungeons in the future. After saying goodbye, the porters leave. Now that he is alone, Dong Hun finally checks his dungeon clear rewards. Among the rewards, he finds a B-rank item called Trace of the Ancient Desert. Curious about what this mysterious item can do, Dong Hun prepares to examine it more closely.